Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Christina Fox, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at TechAlliance, and we have a deep sense of gratitude and respect for this land, waters, and resources protected by Indigenous peoples for centuries. I want to acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the Shunkdun peoples, and honoring all the original peoples of Turtle Island and recognizing the trauma, genocide, and history of Indigenous peoples, TechAlliance continues to work alongside all allies Indigenous-led businesses to advance prosperity for the region's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. We encourage each of you and your businesses to be informed and act so reconciliation can truly happen. TechAlliance empowers world-class ventures and fuels growth in Canada's innovation economy, and we're unique in our organization and opportunity, providing entrepreneurs and ventures at all stages with professional development, story amplification, mentorship, coaching, connections, and access to capital, to customers, and to talent to ensure the innovative economic growth happens across Southwestern Ontario. If you'd like to engage with our venture growth team, read stories about innovation shaping our community with world-changing ideas, or join other upcoming experiences like today, I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter using the link that's being placed in the chat. You, of course, can connect with us on socials and our newsletter, and the links will also be dropped in the chat for you. And before we get the masterclass started, I wanted to offer our thanks to Robertson Hall Insurance for being a partner to us in community to ensure that we can deliver these kinds of experiences to you when you need it the most. A few housekeeping points. All participants' microphones are muted, so please relax, sit back, and enjoy. This masterclass will be recorded in case you want to go back and think about some of the things that Chris shares today and review that content. You can replay on our YouTube channel, and I encourage you to ask any questions that you'd like in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. I'll be looking to the Q&A feature to ask some questions of Chris, and that's where I'll be looking for your questions. If you want to comment throughout the duration of this masterclass, please go ahead and light up the chat feature and offer celebration and commentary and excitement as Chris shares his insight. So this masterclass will dive into proven strategies on how to prepare your team for your next phase of business growth. You will learn how some companies scale successfully, how you can identify your light bulb moment accurately, and grow your team with the right skill sets. Leading our learning today is serial innovator Chris Wynder, who is the Director of Marketing of Developer Programs at OpenText. Chris's link to LinkedIn will be dropped in the chat, and feel free to go ahead and connect with him after the masterclass. So transitioning his career from academic to leading product marketing initiatives in the IT industry, Chris currently spearheads the marketing division at OpenText, one of Canada's largest software companies, and develops and sells enterprise information management software. With a decade of experience as an IT consultant and industry analyst, he brings a really unique perspective to solving customer problems through his expertise in forming go-to-market strategies and building strong relationships. If you met Chris, you'll know that this is one of his superpowers. Please join me in welcoming Chris for this masterclass, Unleashing the Aha Moment for Innovators. Over to you, Chris.
Sorry about that. My two screens are becoming a problem. So, Christine, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. TechAlliance, it's been a great start of a collaboration over the last year, and I love the opportunity to tell these stories. So, Christine largely told the who am I, but there's a couple things I want to, before I dive in, trying to give you a little bit more context on what the agenda is for today. As Christine mentioned, I made the career transition from an academic into first a biotech, which we didn't do so well, but that turned into an IT consulting career. And so, what I'm going to talk about today is not just what I've done at OpenText, but I'm going to reach back a little bit and look at some of the companies that I've worked with, over 200 companies that I've worked with over the last decade, and some of them that I've done some analyst work with, and some that I've analyzed for other companies, and really talk about what has been the groundwork and foundational skill set that companies use when they make that transition from small startup to thriving scale up. there's some things that are still true, even though the age of AI or whatever we want to call that has kind of changed things. There's some things that we've seen that really become the definitive power set that you can use at no matter your size to grow. And there are things that we've kind of templatized at OpenText for our new product launches, really around our API business and this new business with a different market set than we normally go after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a couple stories, and I'm going to intersperse that with how I've taken that and used that to work with my team, to work with the engineering team and the sales team, to try and get us all on the same page and to move this forward, because that's really one of the things that you find when you move forward. Well, let's start. As I mentioned, I am a former scientist, so I always think in science terms. So I'm going to level set a little bit and give a sense of what we see in the market and where this journey starts. So for everybody probably on this call, whether you are a solopreneur or whether you're a small company or whether you're at that mid-size or beyond stage, you have a unique DNA. You have that piece of you, which is the problems that you understand, and then you pair that with your unique insight, and that's the DNA of your company. It could be whether you are health tech or you are consumer tech, doesn't matter. You've started off because you have a passion you've seen a problem and you want to solve it, and you have a unique way that you want to solve it. Now that's great. And what that means is that when you're talking about early success, and for those of you who are still in the throes of this, it may not seem like easy, but what you're really looking for is early success is an exact match. You're looking for somebody who has the problems that you know really well. But what we also know is that there's a limited subset of those. And so if you're looking to get bigger and you're looking to grow your business and you're looking to thrive, you need to find a way to take what you thought was the business and get it to bear fruit, right? And a lot of that's going to come from identifying the opportunities that create more opportunity for you, whether that is a change in market or whether that is something else. There's some key things that become your blockers. And where I want to start with is a couple factors that I've seen over the last 10 years, and those have been exasperated by Gen AI, on where companies fail to thrive, where they may survive, but they're not thriving. They're not getting larger. Some of those are the industry that you have that passion and you have that unique insight in. Some of those are just inherently harder, whether it's because of their complexity of hardware and software problems, whether it's because of the industry has a lot of compliance overhead. They're just harder industries to thrive in. The other one, and the two are interrelated, the other one is the cost structures. And what do I mean by cost structures? There's two parts to it. One of it is the technical of how you design that version one. That might not be optimal, right? That might be what you and your team were able to build and what you know how to build. But is that optimal for 100 customers, 10,000 customers? Maybe not. And some of the things around you've created a system that is designed around the way you work that may not be optimized from an operational perspective when you get larger. So some of those structures that may hamper your ability to thrive might be as simple as you just don't have the skill set yet to build it properly. And so what I want to do is talk through some of these problems and talk through it largely through example. Because there's when we flip it and look at why companies that thrive, there's really only two things that they obsess about. And I hinted at this. It's the problem solved. So what problems do they solve? And their technical excellence. And so these are the core basis, and they're the only things. Whether you're looking at a company that thrived in the sense that they've been around for 25 business and been profitable for 25 years, or whether you're looking at the unicorns, the ones that went from $0 to $1 billion overnight, there's very similar foundational pieces that they have in common. So when we talk about the technical excellence, it's the uniqueness of their solution. Now, I think there's an important piece, and the reason that I chose unique and not best is it doesn't have to be the best. It just has to be different than other people. Sometimes what we think of as the best was the best 5 years ago. It's not the best for 2 years from now. So the idea of focusing on a unique solution to a problem actually gives you more opportunities to grow, particularly if that unique solution has a scalability into it. It's scale ready. And the one thing that is really interesting and unique about companies that thrive is they plan for points of failure. They have what if plans, I like to call them, for their technical excellence. And the three of them go hand in hand. And the first example I'll show will really talk we'll talk through that and I'll dive into it. But I think where one of the most interesting things is really around the problem solved, and the things that they obsess about are not what you would think. So I think most of us, and this caught me by surprise when I started to really dive into it and I started to talk to people who overcome these things. It's not what and how to solve a problem that companies that thrive obsess about. It's who and when. Who has the problem and when in their life cycle do they have that problem? That's not just for marketing purposes. That's to understand the drivers of what caused the problem to be important enough that they'll pay for it, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. We're not trying to define somebody's problem today. We're trying to define a problem that they will pay you money to fix. And that's a slightly different animal. And that's was the really aha moment first when I started to do this, when I started to collate these across different companies. So with this in mind, this idea that problem solved technical excellence are the things that companies obsess about, let's take a look at a company that we all know. And you'll see in the examples, I'll try and do this, and I'll intersperse this with some ways that I've used this. So Uber, everybody knows Uber, right? Uber is a rideshare company. But I think I would push back on that. Are they really a rideshare company, or are they something different? Um, and there's some reasons that I'll say that, and I'll go through this first, and then I'll explain the reasons that I say that. So let's apply that same kind of logic to it. What's the problem they solve, and what's their technical excellence? And so when we think about it that way, are they really solving just getting a person from A to B, or is it something different? And I would argue that it's something different. What they really are is just-in-time supply and demand. In this case, they are supplying a rider who has a problem of getting from A to B with a driver who is willing to take them from A to B. Now, in London, Ontario, or in our region, that may not sound like a big deal. I mean, there's reasonable places where you could go. There's only so many places you could go, and there's everybody pretty much says yes. In a city like New York or Paris or other places, that's not always true. And so when the founders realized this through their own personal experience, they were very passionate about it. But if we look at this instead of as a rideshare, but as a just-in-time supply chain demand, some of the other decisions that they've made over the last 5 years actually make a lot more sense. You had COVID and people wanted food, but they didn't want to go out. So that's a just-in-time supply chain management issue. Similarly with alcohol and hard goods like umbrellas. So when you open the aperture and you think about what they do and the problems that they solve from a who and when, it's a person and it's right now. That's the problems that they solve. It's not the ride, which is the what. It's the who and the when. So why does this matter? Why am I making such a big deal out of Uber? Everybody knows Uber made money from the beginning. Well, that's actually not true. So Uber built a platform that was unlike anybody else's platform. But for when they were just a rideshare company, they were losing money, major money, $2-3 billion a year. And this was because they had a narrow focus. They were only worried about rideshare. They were worried about rideshare and going different geographies, which meant that they had their cost structures were out of balance. They had high compliance overhead. They had high technical overhead. They had all these problems. But when they started to look at the problem different and said, you know what, we're not so to steal from the term, we're not manufacturing footballs, we're manufacturing oblong objects. What else uses oblong objects? Well, rugby. So this is a very personal example to me, but what I'm saying here is that if you think about the problem slightly different and you focus on the who and when for the problem solved rather than the what and how, you get to different answers and you get to more opportunities that you can take your solution to, particularly if you have technical excellence. So Uber had a technical platform that was unlike anything anybody else did. It allowed you to connect a triangle problem of a person who wanted to get a ride, a person who was willing to get a ride, but only under these conditions, and a location. Now, you can then take that and you can do a lot of things. But what they weren't doing was making money because that was a really expensive platform to build until they started stacking other problems. And you can see it in their financial reports. Until they added their delivery business, they're losing about $1 billion a year. And when they added the delivery, within 4 quarters, they went from negative to positive because they'd found another problem that could be solved where their technical excellence delivered value to a customer at a lower price point. So they could take what they did best on the technical excellence and use that to solve a new problem. And that's one of the things that's really important here when we talk about these things is how do we take advantage of what we do well? Sometimes it's the technical excellence in the case of Uber, and in the case of OpenText, what we've done, we had a platform that allowed our company to partner with the Microsofts and the SAPs of the world, anywhere in the world that they wanted to do business, and keep the business regional. But we didn't have a way to make that profitable until we decided that we needed to work with developers and startups and other ISVs. And that allowed us to take what we had built, which was excellent and worked at the very large level, and go into another market. And then it became just identifying the problem solved and then identifying the people who had that problem and how do we get them. It becomes a marketing problem rather than a technical problem. We had the technical excellence and we knew who and when, we just needed to get to them. And that's a really easy thing to do compared to defining, a new technical platform to go after a new problem. Taking a single product and pivoting it to a different market, it's a lot simpler and cost-effective solution than building out another whole product to get to that group. And so part number one is when we start to think about these problems, when we start to think about how do you get to this point where you can instill this as skills, there's a couple things that you need to be able to do on a consistent basis. One is make a technical roadmap. And so let me take another example from my past. So consulting, you can still have a technical roadmap for consulting. So for example, when I was making the decision on whether to stay an independent consultant or go into work for another firm, one of the things I did is I roadmapped out all my solutions. What could I sell? Who could I sell? And what did I need to build or create to make that work? I needed a blog. I needed this. These are the technical roadmaps from a consulting perspective. Because of the hard goods, they're the durable goods that need to be created so that you had something to sell. What's interesting though, and where this gets into that interesting problem with Uber, is that you need to overlay that onto your business map. So for example, the Uber problem, they could have increased the number of places where they sold the same product, but that wasn't leading them to profitability. They tried it, and then they had to pivot and say, okay, we have the gearbox over here. Why not take advantage of that and look at what else we could sell? Yes, we're still going to get to other places, but let's focus on the profitability here and move that to more of a long-term item. So they didn't they didn't remove items from the roadmap. They pivoted their roadmap and the priority of the items so that they could have a business map that aligned to profitability. Because again, that's what we're looking to. That's what thriving really is. It's being profitable and giving yourselves the ability to go to other places. What's interesting about the Uber thing is that once they made that pivot to having a delivery, the Uber Eats being their primary source of revenue, it gave them the opportunity to do a lot of things. In the last year, they were able to create $1 billion fund to fund partners that did similar things in one of those two business areas, their mobility business or the delivery business. So they were able to find $1 billion because they could see where the market was going. Their business could could attract more business. And they're able to align that technical map and that business map so they could be profitable. Let's take another look, and this is going to be a bit tongue in cheek. And this is one of my favorite examples of taking your problem and pivoting it. So we all know the little blue pill. What most people don't know, and what I'm going to tell you now, is the story of the little blue pill. It started off, and it was a middling heart drug, right? So I'm not going where you thought I was going with that one. Started off as a middling heart drug, went through clinical trials. I won't go through all the details, but essentially what happened was the compliance office noticed that people were doing things that maybe weren't in their best heart health with it. But when they pivoted, they're able to show profitability, and the little blue pill is now one of the most profitable pharma innovations ever, and it created a whole new class. And that was because they looked at what it did and they said, well, we can't change the pill, but there's a problem that it's solving. How do we double down on that problem that it's solving? And that came from a bit of intuition, and it came from looking at the market segmentation, the market dynamics. Who were we targeting before? Do they have a different problem solve, and when is it important to them? And they realized that for many of these people who they'd had in the trial, this secondary use case became a more important aspect and something that they would pay for. While overall health is important, the value to the customer was actually in the secondary use case, in this case, erectile dysfunction. And so they're able to pivot the business, and then they pull that profit in. Now, the good news is, because they are willing to make that decision, they are able to continue doing research on the drug and find additional secondary use cases for it. So sometimes your business map will lead you back to where you were at the beginning, but it's important that, as you move from this, as you move to start to thrive, as you move to look to how you grow the business, that you're open to doing that analysis. And that's where I want to kind of lead you to next is through a startup that I've been working with over the last kind of year and a half. They were part of our hackathon a year and a half ago. And they had this really great medical imaging product that they'd created from scratch. And they had what they felt was a really specific, could never be used anywhere else problem. But the problem is that getting into medical is really hard. And if you are trying to bootstrap something in healthcare, as some of you may know, it's a really really difficult thing to do. The compliance overhead, the cost structures are hard, the industry's hard. So what we worked on them was, well, you've created this, let's talk about the technical piece. You've created this really great viewer that also uses AI to identify conversations related to that image that the users had around that image and with that person, which is really interesting technology. So we said, well, what about other industries? So one thing that is very, very similar, same kind of problem, it's still the imaging, it's still healthcare, is veterinary medicine. Lower cost overhead, but the similar talking track, so you can take advantage of your existing operations, maybe just pivot to going to small veterinary clinics or large corporate veterinary clinics rather than small hospitals and corporate hospitals. And what about field management? So an area where this kind of solution would be really important is anywhere where you're dealing with out in the field, whether it's conservation work, whether it's oil and gas, where you're trying to understand the role of the technical pieces of a oil rig. There's a lot of problems that are very similar, can use the same technical backing with maybe some minor tweaks, but it's a different problem, and maybe it's a lower cost problem. So again, going back to this idea of part of the skill set you need to thrive is that creativity of saying, what about? we built this for this. We're seeing some success, but what about this? Uber said, what about food? Viagra said, what about family planning? And so there's another piece of it which says, well, if yes, we're interested in sticking with healthcare, but what about the consumer aspect of it? What if we tweaked our technical roadmap and went when in the accessibility aspect? We can use some of the same pieces and we add X, Y, and Z at cost 1, 2, and 3. We can provide a accessibility offering which is related to the same platform, and it's a differentiated product with a lower cost structure. So again, this idea that one of the things that you want to be able to do as you're looking at how you thrive, it's not necessarily that you need to double down and get really expensive workforce. It's you need to work smarter, not harder. And so when we look at this, and these are a couple examples, and there's a few more, I have lots more examples, but I think it's more important to pivot to what you should do or what you could do. And I think one of the things that's most important, and it's hard. I've over the last couple of years, I've been working with enough startups and smaller businesses. You don't have the time to do these big picture things, but I think it's really important. I think it's something that you, as a founder, as the C level in your mid market company or president of your mid market company, you just have to figure out how to carve out some time to do these things, because this is how your company is going to thrive. It's the ironic thing of if you don't take the time to do some planning, you'll never get the time to do some planning. There has to be something that you can not do today that maybe would allow you to do these kind of things. And I think if you start off with defining your DNA, what is the problems that you solve? What's your technical excellence? What's that unique solution that you bring to the market? And then defining your tribe. So what do I mean by this? So you know what your first customer looked like. What are similar customers? What are related markets? So I'll take healthcare because it's one that I know best. If you typically have sold to a physiotherapy org, what are the related things to physiotherapy? Is there something around the size? Is there a certain size that would help define your tribe? Is there a certain use case where it's not direct primary care, but it is the therapeutic parts around it? Is that your tribe? Is that who looks at you and goes, oh, I could use that? And then understand their hassles. So again, when I say a hassle, I'm not talking about the little things that make life difficult. What I mean is, what are the things that they absolutely would pay somebody to not have to do tomorrow? And then prioritize the based off of the fit. So, for example, sticking with the technical solution for physiotherapy, maybe occupational therapy offices are the right place. Maybe it is pediatric services that's the right fit. Maybe it's both, but one has a better likely outcome and higher revenue potential to you than the other. So how do you get this going? Again, we're focusing on growth. So these are the kind of questions that I work through with helping people ask themselves and really being clear. Who'd you build it for? Who else would buy it? And sometimes question B is really a matter of, well, who else has found you? Or what were the things that people asked you about? Oh, could you do X? If you have a list of those people or those things that people said, I know you say you're healthcare, but could you do real estate? And you probably dismissed it right away because, it's not something that you normally do, but maybe it's worth reevaluating. And I think the most important thing, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs that have A and B, importantly, because it's going to take time to grow that market, because it's going to take time to get there, will they care in 2 years? Does your existing customer care? Are they going to care in 2 years? And are new markets going to care in 2 years? That's the hardest one for people to understand. Maybe that's somewhere where you have to go outside of your own piece. So the hassles. What are the processes that drive revenue for your customers or drive cost decreases for your customers. What hassles are in those processes? So, for example, medical care. There's a couple key parts that are really just, and so again, throwing on my information management consultant hat. There's a couple parts of it that are hassles because they're just moving a document from A to B, from person to person, where it feels like a system should be able to do this. That's a hassle that should be really simple to fix. There's lots of ways to fix it. And that process slows down because of that hassle. And so, how general are those hassles? So, for example, moving a document from fax to email to a data center to a database. That's actually a pretty common hassle. You might be able to find other places where that potential hassle and the unique solution that you've come up with have the ability to fix what they're doing. And prioritize on fit. Can you drive? And so this is the single most important question when you identify a new market that you could go after, a new geography that you can go after. Can you drive value to more than one user? What's your potential here? Can you make this a whole organization tool? Does your DNA align to there? So where you see yourself going, where the unique solution is, do you have to change your unique solution to show them value? That's not a good fit, right? That's not a good prioritization, because then that's going to come with its own cost structures and other things. I see so many small and mid-sized businesses that chase the dragon to get large enterprises to buy their solution. And they end up costing themselves a lot of money and don't get any bang for the buck because they can't use the enterprise business's name. They can't get them to introduce them to other customers. But now you're stuck with a 3-year contract where you're required to build X, Y, and Z for them. You get stuck into a position where the value of the initial contract seemed like a revenue generator, but it's actually going to over the course of time cost you more money and cost you the focus on where you could have thrived and grown the business. And it's important to recognize that has to be part of the question that you ask yourself. The other one is kind of that brand questions is how many are you ready for? So it's that good news, bad news problem, right? You got the tiger by the tail. You've come up with, the next Uber. If you can only service 5 customers and you get 50, what's the chances that the comments on your website and the comments about you and the word on the street is going to be positive? If 45 out of 50 had a negative experience and couldn't even get to the point where they're buying your product, or couldn't even get to the point where they got great customer service or even average customer service, what's the chances that they're going to look at you in a positive way? It's pretty low. And we know that is a critical element in what happens when you thrive is you get that initial wave of positive reinforcement, positive feedback, and then you can ride that upwards, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so you have to be really careful when you're making that move, not just on that single deal, but how many are you ready to do? And so one of the things so we're getting to the end of this. And so one of the things I want to do is this isn't just about being lucky. This isn't about being in the right place at the right time. One of my favorite phrases is attributed to Ben Franklin. I'm not sure if it's true, but it's luck favors the prepared mind. So one of the things that I've found is that the companies that thrive and take advantage of a new market are the same companies that are rigorous about their process of how they define themselves. They define their personas. They define what they fix for their customers. They define how they're going to go after each customer. So one of the things that I've done, and I share freely, is a way to develop that skill. It's a simple Excel tool that helps you define the personas. It walks you through the questions that you should be asking yourself and your team on those personas and how you get to them. Probably has to be tweaked depending on your industry and the other parts, but I have a couple examples in there. One is a healthcare example. Understanding the hassles. How do you visualize this so you can understand where the key breakpoints are that you can actually create a unique solution for and articulate what that unique solution for the problem that your customer is having, right? Because they're all going to have a different version of the same thing. How do you do that? And so who do you go after? So then this becomes part of the same kind of basic template of how do we define who we can sell to, how we can sell them, how do we get started, where do we get started, right? These are the important questions that you want to be able to you want to be able to templatize so that your 5-person team that's in charge of this can then take care of 50 customers. And then that gives you the revenue and the operational comfort that you can take 50 and turn it into 5,000. But what's really important and kind of what I've mapped out in this tool is that it's really a 5-step process. So you have to develop when you're starting off as a startup or as a smaller company that doesn't do this for a living, is you have to develop the personas. So what do I mean by the persona? I mean, who uses the product, who buys the product, who has to make the decision. And you've got to learn how to be very standardized and very critical of your personas. And so there's a whole way that you can go through this. There's lots of training on that. I'm happy to talk people through how you develop personas. It's one of the things that I train the OpenText product marketing and some of the other folks at sorry, at OpenText and doing is developing personas based off of market research. Then define the persons. What is an individual like? So for example, healthcare. What's different between how a doctor's day goes versus a nurse's day goes? And then, how do they interact? How do those people interact? And that gives you your hassle map. And then prioritize the organizational level. And with that, I want to say thank you. I appreciate your time. Christine, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Well, with that, I feel like, Chris, if you need to grab a glass of water or something, feel free to do that because I think we're having a few questions populate in the Q&A. I want to start with, wow, how phenomenal. Lots of really interesting concepts simplified down for our audience to sort of follow the bouncing ball. The lessons that you've shared, you can see like applicability to really early stage companies who are ideating and determining their pathway, but also to companies who are larger in scale, maybe have taken on investment and are looking at adjacent markets and identifying the ways that they can actually have the aha moments converted to something that they can actually do in business. So thanks, Chris. I think what we're going to do now is I do see actually a couple of questions in the Q&A, and so I'll ask them, and I would encourage anybody else who is on the call today, on the masterclass today, go ahead and drop questions in the Q&A. That's where I'll be looking for questions. If you're dropping in the chat, I may not see them, but we're going to use the technology that's afforded to us through Zoom to use a Q&A. So we've got the first one here is, how do you recommend balancing innovation with the day-to-day operations when a company is scaling, and how can leaders ensure that both are given the right focus? That's a great question, actually.
It is a great question. And I think it depends on where you're at, right? So your ability to scale is, not to get too mathy on this one, your ability to scale is a function of how many employees you have versus how much of their time is required for day to day. Now, I would love to tell you that if you are a 10-person company, you should find 2 hours per day for your top 3 employees to make the time. It's just not that simple. And it really depends on your industry. Some of the things where you have high customer support, it's really hard to take that risk of saying, you know what, we're going to shut down the company for 3 hours. Because at some point you'll get to that point, and the companies that thrive get to that point and they communicate with their existing customers and say, you know what, we need a half day. We're going to sit down for emergencies only, and we're going to have this line that's available to you, but please only use it for emergencies. And then you just take a few hours, and then it becomes something where then you can iterate on the plan, but you have to get that first plan on paper or not paper nowadays, but it really has to be about, at some point, you're going to have to say that we're at a point where it's either we make the jump to be larger or we decide this is us. And when you hit that point, I think most startups know it. Most startups know it, and most scale ups get a sense of it. It's hard once you get past about 50 employees to really make that time. But unfortunately, it's kind of like the decision, in the US, it's the porn decision. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And that's
Mhm.
kind of, that's, you'll reach that point where you just hit the ceiling, and the common thread is that we don't know who else we could sell this to. We're continuing to fail when we sell to the same people that we thought we were selling to a year ago. There's just no more market for what we're doing. That's when you have to say, well, what about X? Or what about this person?
Okay, a really similar question actually in the Q&A that from an attendee says, we're pivoting or entering a new market is something we've always been looking at, but do we need to onboard a new salesperson for the potential new market? And how do you manage the existing market while trying to expand a new one? It's almost the same problem statement as the one that we've covered, but as it relates to sales, which is a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I think so. I think my where I've seen organizations have success is, it really depends on the problem. So if we're talking about a software problem,
Mhm.
I don't think you need the new sales team. You do need the new sales enablement. You do need to build out the talk script that gets them to the point where they can make, if you're pivoting from consumer goods to healthcare, and I apologize for continuing to go back to healthcare. We all become a prisoner of what we know best. Um, you need to be able to talk to the CMIO and be able to say, it's not exactly what you're looking for, but if you give me 5 minutes, I can show you it, and I'm willing to take feedback. That doesn't require a new salesperson. If your jump is geographic, where it's no longer in your home province, or it's no longer close enough where your existing sales team can take care of your day-to-day business and develop a new market, that's when I think there's a lot of value in potentially bringing in a new salesperson or a new sales pathway.
Awesome. Thank you. What advice do you have for businesses that are scaling but struggling to find the right talent to help them grow? And how do you suggest navigating today's competitive market? And I also want to do a call out to Lauren Starr, who shamelessly plugged the opportunity for participants on this masterclass to reach out to her if they're seeking business students. So shout out to you, Lauren, and back to you, Chris, for the talent question.
Yeah, it's right now is, you know, I've been training and working with and promoting and getting people to pivot from jobs for just about 20 years now. It is the most delicate and painful time
Hmm.
right now. We don't necessarily, you have this weird problem mix of, you don't have people who have had a wide range of jobs through university and high school like they used to when I was a youngster going through it, when I worked at a pharmacy delivery and I worked for a camera place and I worked for, you don't see that as much in the kind of 18 to 25. So you don't have the young workforce that comes in with that same level of just width and breadth. Um so right now is really hard, and I think one of the things that I think you're seeing, so if you look at like the big picture thinkers at Harvard Business School and things like that, I think one of the things, and one of the reasons that I developed the tool, is that at some point you have to train your own. It's cheaper in general than hiring somebody that can do it. Um, but that gets really hard. Training people is not for everyone. So it's really hard right now, because just the talent to live with the chaos that is today is not Like everybody needs to be trained to deal with today. Like it is like nothing that has existed in probably 15 years. Most of the people that could probably figure this out and have dealt with a change this big, you know, the rotary phone to the BlackBerry is probably the last change as monumental from a sales and sales management perspective. Most of those people are not willing to, be people on the streets. Maybe that's the right person to find to train them. If somebody knows a great answer for it, I'm all ears. It's a problem that I haven't been able to solve. The talent problem is a real concern for the jumping and the thriving.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think one of the things that we find in operating with an advocacy lens for one of North America's top emerging tech markets right here in London, Ontario and Southwestern Ontario is that talent continues to be one of those areas that technology companies require support. We often hear about customers, first customers, adjacent markets. We hear about capital, and we hear about talent. So I think one of the nice things that we get to do in operating as an innovation hub in this region is we do have our job board and we do have our roster. So the roster is a place where people who are looking for a transition or underemployed or making a change in their career, they could add themselves to the roster. And of course, then we post some of the best jobs on the job board. And so those are two products that we generally share with the technology community. But hearing from people like yourself and others that that talent continues to be an area where there could be some great opportunity to close a gap, we'll continue as an organization advocating across the country to ensure that we are making those things happen for companies. So I appreciate you giving that really honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too that I find is, folks come to us and they say, I've got this, particular skill set and I'm looking at upgrading skills. And they'll often ask our team, our advisors, what are the most sought after jobs? And so when you think about even the roles at OpenText right now and other software companies, what are the kinds of things that you're looking for from skill set and education credentialism, and also on personality and preferences?
Yeah, I think I would almost flip my priority as the personality. And I think given where we're at, right, and what we're going to see in the next 4 years, like we're not out of the earthquakes are still happening. I think that openness to trying things and that ability to have a plan for when you stop. I hate the phrase fail fast, but I love the meaning behind it. The idea that we should try it without having a full scale budgeted plan for a 5 year project. People who are willing to give that a go, but have the ability to have a project plan and say, here's my checkpoints, here's what we should be able to do, and be given honest assessment of, what didn't happen. We had this one. We had this. So part of this comes from my personal experience. So one of the things that Christina, as you know, we started about a year and a half ago was the Thrust for Partners program, where I reached out to you and your team and said, hey, how can we do this? And one of the things that came from that I used to get the opportunity to create this was I created that project plan with very clear, very loosey-goosey objectives, but very clear, here's where the decision point is, and here's the information that here's what I think is positive. And then I took that to my leadership and said, hey, we need to create this. Everybody's on board with creating it. Here's what I think we need to do, because this is different than OpenText has done before. Mm-hmm. So if you ask me for the skills, and I apologize for going as long and around it as I could. One, project management / the ability to create a task list and work to that. A certain level of, depending on the day and depending on how I feel about it, stupidity or creativity to be honest with your leadership. Some days it's not a good idea. Some days it's very creative. Those are kind of the most important things. I think from a credentialing perspective, it's less about the ability to code now and more about the ability to understand code if you're in the tech sector. And it's more, I would place emphasis on people who have a little bit of industry interest. So I think one of the things that we're seeing at all levels, and certainly our partners are seeing, is that it is easier to say, I have a technology and have a conversation in an industry than it is to say, I know this industry, here's the technology you should get. So
Awesome.
that's a really long way of saying that it's really fluid. I think companies are going to have to go back to the 1980s and 1990s style of we're going to train you up to be so important that you're never going to leave and we're never going to want you to leave.
That's awesome. You know, we can sometimes get really scripted answers. And what I love about this is you were prepared to play on the gray. And sounds like you're on the creative side today. So that's a good thing. You know, I want to offer my sincere thanks to you. I know we're almost at time, so I want to offer my sincere thanks to you for joining us today. Masterclasses are one of the things that we love to deliver to this ecosystem and fostering a vibrant technology community, putting together thought leaders like yourself on topics that will have an awful lot of nuggets for different members of our live and replay audience. And so for that, my sincere thank you for joining us today. And for some of you, if you've got some time tomorrow afternoon, TechAlliance has been hosting our tech meetups each and every month in London. And there is one tomorrow evening. So I encourage you to jump online. I'm sure we'll drop the link in the chat, or you can go to the events calendar and go to the link in the chat. But there's a tech meetup tomorrow evening at Beer Town. Would love to see you register. And the good news for those who are on live audience today, Chris is going to be there. So you can continue this conversation, ask some questions that you may not have dropped in the Q&A, and pick his brain even further. And I want to offer our thanks to Chris and OpenText for being a strong partner for our tech meetups each and every month, and offer my thanks again for Robertson Hall for supporting us so we can deliver masterclasses like this in the community. Again, Chris, thanks so much for your time today. Take good care, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, TechAlliance.
Bye for now.